That was Dr. Dackel. She was the pediatrician for this young lady beginning in July 2016. Didn't last very long. Let me bring a new guest in, David Schoen. David, you practice in many jurisdictions, including here in New York and also in Alabama, which makes you roll tide and have a connection to Roger. Let me ask you this. Where's the defense attorney?
Right. Well, we don't know really what the theory of the case is for sentencing in this case. What we saw from the defendant was the sort of challenging not only the forensic evidence, but whether the forensic expert even testified to what she testified to. That has to be absolutely horrible preparation. He may not be an easily controlled witness, but somebody has to tell this guy which issues to fight on and not fight on. Listen, the prosecution theory clearly is they got this child they adopted less than a year earlier and felt they were blindsided because she had these genetic conditions, and therefore they were brutal to the kid. If they intend to fight the specific forensic evidence, then an approach obviously would be that those problems, those broken bones happened before she was ever adopted, have nothing to do with them. But they have to be careful. They don't want to fight too much on the details here. If their theory of sentencing is begging for mercy for this guy because the jury has a very broad range, then they have to really wake up a little bit here. Not only waken this guy up, but also put that theory of defense forward.
Right, let me just stop you 1 second. Roger, really quickly, I counted possibilities. Either the wife is a domestic violence victim, she's a co-conspirator, her husband took the blame for her. If it's by omission, she was working a time, or he just is abusive to the child and she had nothing to do with it. What say you?
I don't know. Those are all possibilities, Linda. What he did or what he didn't do, he pled guilty to failing to care for this child that caused her death. So he obviously did something. We don't know. I agree with your first guest that just said where the defense needs to do something and they need to know what they're fighting and what their theme is.
Right. And Ann Brebner, you have been with us. I have to say goodbye to you. I don't have time for a question, but your insight this morning, I was watching you with when Bob Bianchi, our other host, was there, is absolutely great. We're in jury verdict watch in the case of Wesley Mathews. Stay with us. We're going to have to take a quick break. Sometimes jurors need post-traumatic stress disorder treatment after they hear this. Let me talk to my guest about this, David Schoen from Alabama and New York, and my fighter, my Golden Glove fighter, who is also, by the way, a football player with Roll Tide. Now, I think that because the medical examiner can't determine the cause of death, the jury could be there saying, was this poor woman suffocating, you know, in the duct tape, or did it end quickly? And I think that could be worse for the defense. What do you think, Roger?
I'm surprised that the state's putting on a medical expert who can't tell whether it was asphyxiation. Anyone who's ever had a case that deals with asphyxiation, there's vessels, there's changing, there's things in the eyelids that they can see. So what it sounds like, he said there was no evidence of asphyxiation. That means she died of being stabbed, and she felt each stab, each of those 5 wounds, and was dealt a horrible death, and she felt the pain as she died. This wasn't a quick death. She bled out slowly. It's horrific. And like you said, every person's worst nightmare, thinking about their children, their loved ones, that this could happen to them.
Yeah, and David, there was some testimony that the doctor knew of, and the scene pictures, he knew that she had been found kind of wrapped with duct tape around her head, and she was wrapped in a comforter. Does that tell you whether or not the crime, the stabbing, took place in a comforter, or was she abducted? You know, what does the medical evidence tell you? Because I know when I look at this case, I say, I could be in my home one day and end up dead in about 10 minutes by some stranger who I've never met.
Well, I think Roger's exactly right, that especially after all this time, the idea that they put on a forensic expert who can't tell those key questions is important. However, on the other hand, you know, they're sort of laying the groundwork for the penalty phase in this case. I mean, it's a tough case for the defense to win on guilt or innocence. And so the duct tape paints a horrific picture. It looks like torture. It looks like, you know, heinous, atrocious, and cruel. It looks like they're laying the groundwork, at least, for some aggravating factors. As we know, under the Florida statute, now that it's been fixed, the jury has to unanimously agree on at least one aggravating factor in the case. So I think that's got to be a big thrust of the prosecution's case at this point.
Well, I would hate to be, guys, in the position where I have to put on a medical expert and say, oh, no, she wasn't suffocated to death. She was stabbed to death, and that's a mitigating factor. I don't think that's doable, Roger.
This is just tough. Like David just said, I mean, ultimately, we know he's already given a confession, right? So it's been played for the jury. He gave a confession. Now he's trying to retract it. This is extremely difficult for any defense attorney, a whole team of defense attorneys. I don't know how you win it, but it looks like the issue is going to be mitigation. Is he going to get life in prison, or is he going to get the death penalty?
Well, David, one of the things I don't understand, it's unclear how he chose this house. And, you know, talk about a moment in time. She is at the wrong place at the moment in time, a place where she's worked for 6 years, where she's taken care of a young child named Oliver. But by the grace of God, he wasn't there. But how do you think he decided this house? And then what happened? Because the jury's thinking what we are.
Right. Well, this is exactly your point on why this kind of crime is so scary. It appears to be random. I mean, what we know about this guy is he says he hates rich people, and I guess this had the appearance, at least, of being that kind of setting. But no, you're right. That's what makes it particularly scary. It looks to be random. It's extraordinarily violent, and it is a very scary crime. Listen, maybe the defense comes up with their own expert in this case that's relevant to either guilt or innocence or penalty. Maybe someone like a Michael Baden just shows up, you know, out of the blue here.
I don't think my husband would take this case, but that's okay. Anyhow, we have to go to a quick break. Stay with us. We have a verdict watch again. Sign up, Law&Crime Verdict. We'll be right back. Before I discuss with my guests, guess what? There is a jury light on, and we as lawyers, whenever we hear that, we go, oh my God, is it a verdict? Is it a question? Oh my God, you can't speak. Well, you ladies and gentlemen have to stay with us, because we're going to know pretty soon, does the jury have a question? Do they want to go home? Or do we have a verdict in the case of Texas versus Wesley Mathews? Now, let me bring my guests in to discuss. David Schoen from Alabama, thank you for the plug. Yes, I am married to Dr. Michael Baden. Yes, we have medical examiner testimony all over today. So I'm very aware of the issues. But let me ask you this. The prosecutor didn't open with that here. And the way this goes here, the prosecutor says a little opening, then the defense says a big opening, and then the prosecutor again goes, like the federal system again at the end, and it's a different prosecutor, one of the other prosecutors who prosecuted this case. So let me ask you this. You are the defense attorney. You're sitting there. What do you do?
Well, I don't know the facts of the forensic evidence, the real facts. In other words, what we're assuming what we're hearing from the prosecutor is there were these horrible broken bones, a series of them over the course of 8 months, which would be obviously fit into this pattern. The child was adopted within a year before the murder. So the point, of course, would be from the prosecution's perspective that these parents were horrible. They either allowed the kids' bones to be broken and never reported them, or much worse, they caused those bones to be broken. And therefore, whatever happened in this case, Matthews should be sentenced at the upper end here, life with possibility of parole. It's hard to know. We haven't heard much from the defense in this case. We don't really know what their theory is.
Right, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Roger Foley, let me ask you this. Okay, I heard this morning for the first time, or maybe it was yesterday, that there was vomit on the little girl on a previous day. Maybe it was the 6th, maybe it was the day before he called 911. Would you have had that vomit tested, and if so, why?
Well, I would want to see what medical conditions she had, right? It may be, because he's indicating that she had some sort of medical condition. People tend to not just choke on milk and die. There's got to be something where her esophagus or throat, something is smaller, whether there's sort of inflammation, bacteria. I would want to know a little bit more about it. But again, the defense is gone. I don't know where they are. David just said, where's the defense? I think they went to the beach, because I'm not hearing objections. I'm not hearing anything. And it's scary to be a defense attorney and sitting as we're watching this, and I'm screaming objection, 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 and I'm not hearing anything. It's inappropriate. The prosecutor's bolstering the testimony of this doctor. Oh, they only call her in when it's something wrong. It's right. It's ridiculous.
You sound like me, but let's listen to the defense closing. Maybe it will help, or maybe we'll all feel the same way. Let's listen. That's part of the defense closing earlier today, representing Wesley Mathews in the omission homicide of his daughter, Sharon, who was 3 years old. I want to bring my guests back in, but before I talk to them, I just want to tell you, we are aware there is a light on in the courtroom. We don't know yet what it means. As soon as we know, you will know whether the jury has a verdict or whether they have a question or whatever. The attorneys are huddling. We'll see. But anyhow, David Schoen from Alabama, from New York, I have a question to you based on his closing. Okay, so you're the defense attorney. You don't look like you have much emotion there. He said to the jury, you're telling me. Now, I didn't like that. Did you?
No, I didn't like that. But I didn't look. I think that's just stylistic with this guy.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I thought was a good piece that I finally saw. I think this piece, I don't know about the photos and the videos, the piece about getting her physical therapy, occupational therapy, looks more like caring parents for the first time. But I think where this guy's going wrong is, I thought he was challenging, maybe going to challenge that the broken bones predated the adoption. He's challenging whether there were broken bones. It's got to be a bluff. Either it's the worst defense lawyer imaginable in this situation, or it's a bluff. Because we'd certainly put on a forensic expert to examine the same records and say that they weren't broken, if that were a defense to raise seriously in the case. I don't know what's going on with that.
Right. And Roger Foley, Roger, two questions. One, would you have had genetic testing done on whatever the remains are, the remains, right? Would you have more genetic testing done? And two, Dr. Dacre reported them to CPS, Child Protective Services, and he said the defendant, when he was cross-examined, one of the reasons why he disposed of the body is because he didn't want CPS to come in and rip his home apart. What say you?
Well, yes, I definitely would have had genetic testing done 100%. I would have wanted to look at those bone fractures and have radiologists and different experts examine that. In regards to the culvert thing, her hiding in the culvert, that's extremely difficult. Even as a defense attorney, I can't imagine. If my child is hurt, chokes, I call an ambulance. I call for help. I don't put her in a culvert 2 blocks down the street and her body's found a week or so later. I can't fathom that. So that's hard for the defense to get past that.
Well, I have some breaking news for the two of you. The jury has reached a verdict in this case. They are not in yet. We're monitoring it. I think you can see parts of the courtroom, but they have reached the verdict. As soon as they come in, we're going to cut right to it. But if you two were not bluffing, okay, because I heard that poker word, that gambling word, and I'm a poker player, as you know, what would you think it is? David?
I didn't really get the question, but
what do you think the verdict is for the sentence from the jury?
Oh, high end, certainly.
High end. Okay, well, I hedged your bets a little bit.
Life without.
Roger.
Life without.
Okay, life. Okay, Roger.
I was hoping to hear from that defense attorney that this gentleman lost his daughter, the love, the person he adopted, the person he took to, for medical attention. He's already lost her. He's already pled guilty. He felt guilty that he didn't do something. Please give me probation. He's already suffered enough by losing his child. I didn't hear that, so I think the jury's going to split the difference.
Okay, so the jury is coming in, but as soon as we can show the courtroom, because as you know, we can't show the jurors, we're going to just cut all of us off and go into that courtroom. In this case, in Texas, Wesley Mathews. Again, let me just say to both of you, even if he gets life, he can get parole after 30 years, but that will be awfully difficult, wouldn't it? And let me throw it first to David.
I don't know. This is a case where he could, that's a stiff sentence. He could get parole after that kind of sentence, I think. But, that's a long time to have to serve in any event.
Yeah, well, Roger, we know that life sentences are taking the place of the death penalty in many jurisdictions. They took death off the table in this state, and many people question that. But it turned out to be a good move because it forced him on the stand where they heard him, the defendant, testify. And I don't think he helped himself, did he?
Not so much. This is just a tough case all the way around. I'm really curious to see. He's already pled guilty. What the appellate courts are going to do. What didn't the lawyers do properly, and whether or not we're going to see this again on Law and Crime.
Well, they are starting. Are we going to go into the courtroom? Not yet. We're going to wait still till the jury gets in. You see everybody standing here. It is so great. I mean, I have a pit in my stomach when I see the jury standing. I have a pit in my stomach when I see about the light going on. And as soon as the judge will tell them all to sit down, I assume. But look at that. Look at this is American justice at work, both of you. You practice here, right? You get the pit in your stomach, right, David?
Oh, absolutely, without any question. But I say, if they had charged
David, I got to cut you off. We have to go right into court. There you have it. The case we have been covering all week. The case that there was cross-examination of him this morning, Wesley Mathews, where there was summations and now a verdict today here on Law&Crime Network. He is guilty of the crime. The jury confirmed that because they must. And he got life imprisonment for the killing of a 3-year-old girl, his daughter he adopted to save her, and now she's dead and he has destroyed the rest of the family. It is just a horrendous situation. Okay, David and Roger, you both predicted that there would be life imprisonment. Now, he had him sign the appeals form, the attorney. There's many grounds for appeals here, aren't there, David?
I assume there are many grounds for appeal, but I think, the bigger question here is what went wrong. If anything, it was a tough case. But, in analyzing this thing, you have to think, how do you challenge forensic evidence in the case from a witness who appears to have no dog in the fight without confronting it with forensic evidence? I think the jury had to be offended by that. And, of course, what they played yesterday with the defendant complaining that he was blindsided here because the girl had genetic problems when they adopted her, that's probably the kiss of death there.
Right. I thought so, too, Roger Foley from Florida. I thought so when he was asked by the prosecution. Remember, when you get cross-examined for our viewers, you're testifying as an attorney. When he asked, Mr. Fine asked, did you call your daughter defective? And he said, no, those are not my kind of words. But the jury had heard that there was many problems that they're going to think he did, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the problem with a language barrier when you're dealing with someone who has English as a second language. But it's your attorney's, your defense team's job to help explain that, to educate the jury so they understand that words that we may not normally use are used in other cultures and other societies. So that's a knock on the defense. And I hate to stand up here and knock another defense attorney, but I just saw glaring problems with this case. But the biggest issue that no one can get past is the child is dead and that he put her in a culvert down the street. And those two things, no matter what you do as a defense attorney, you're going to have a problem with that.
And he didn't testify well. I think that the prosecutor may have shown some brilliance here then, David, by taking the plea where they were initially ragged on for omission, knowing that he'd have to testify. They'd force him to testify really to save his life in the sentencing phase, and he wouldn't be very good, right?
I think you're right, and I think there's no downside to taking this plea. The case never should have been charged as a capital case. Now, I carry capital cases always on my docket. I have 3 right now. This isn't a capital case.
All right. In Texas, though, they did charge it initially, but there was also problems in the proof, wasn't there, Roger Foley? Because they didn't have a cause of death, and because, to me, there's still something one-off. There's something not right about how this all went down. Was the mother involved, or is he just a brutal controller who forced that girl to drink that milk, and maybe that's all they gave her?
Who knows? I mean, there's definitely glaring issues. There's a problem when your medical examiner, some of the statements that she made, and I didn't write down quotes, but there were just things that she said where there wasn't a definitive cause of death, and that bothers me. And the whole thing with the broken bones about the time, it's a coincidence. The child's only in the country 6 months. She says all the injuries are occurring between 3 and 6 months. Where are the experts? Where is the controversy, the conflicting statements of 2 different sets of experts to find out which one's more recognizable and more believable and more credible? And we didn't have that. So I feel like this defendant didn't get the best defense.
And David Schoen, just really quickly, we know that the doctor, the pediatrician, did refer the family to CPS and the case was closed. That's either a glaring omission or that something truly went wrong in this whole system, right?
You're 100% right. It happens every day in this country, in every state, and you're 100% right. It's a glaring deficiency.
Wesley Mathews is guilty, and he's sentenced to life imprisonment. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're the Law and Crime Network. Let me just say to you that the DA of the county where Wesley Mathews was just convicted of killing his daughter by omission and did get life in prison by the jury. The DA just spoke. His name is John Crizo. He says the facts of this case never supported, well, you know, some people disagree, but never supported a capital murder charge. I agree with that. He said that he will be eligible for parole in 30 years, that life in prison was the best the prosecution could have done in this case. I agree with that. And that Mathews will be eligible for parole when he's 69 years old, 2049. I agree that, of course, that's an easy one to agree with. My guest, David Schoen. David, we talked about the fact that the prosecutor may have had a better outcome here by letting him plead to this omission and forcing him sort of to testify, right?
I think you're 100% right. You said that earlier, and I think you're dead on with the thing. And the prosecutor handled this case perfectly, it seems. Yeah, it seems, unless there's going to be something with regard to, you know, overstepping your bounds and misconduct with the questions. But, you know, that's you know, I wouldn't hang my hat on that. Now, Roger Foley, you've been with me again. You're again also from up here in New York, now down in Florida. You're my Golden Gloves championship. What would you have done different to help this man if you think he deserved any help?
Well, the only problem, we don't know what other doctors, what other experts would have said. If I would have had experts that would have given a different story, then this may not have been a plea, because I don't know well, could she have choked on milk? Could she? We don't know. The body was too desecrated after 2 weeks in the heat to find out. So if we had evidence that would help us, I think we're looking at a trial. If the evidence was not for us, then you're taking the plea. But we're mitigating it. We're talking about the sorrow. We're emphasizing the treatment, the doctors that both parents brought the child to for other issues. Well,
I want to thank both of you, my guests, David Schoen and Roger Foley, for being with me today, taking the verdict with a very short jury deliberation, and Wesley Mathews, who got life. You guys are great. Please come back to the Law and Crime Network soon. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be discussing more of this, and you know what's next. Aaron Keller, the Daily Debrief. He will have a full show for you. I'm going to be his guest, as you know. Again, Wesley Mathews, convicted of not only murder, he will serve life in prison, eligible for parole when he's 69. Stay tuned for Aaron's show next.